Hi, I'm Keith Andreen. I am the director and co-writer of Mayfly. And here are my answers for Tinsel and Tine's 5 questions for indie filmmakers. The first person who was inspired with the story for Mayfly was Katrina Law, my co-writer and the lead actress who plays Daniela. And I think it was originally born from a place of her having her first child and being a new parent and having all of the fears that come with that, letting your child down. She was the one who had the genesis of the idea and then came to me with it and wanted me to help her with the writing of it, forging it into a structure. The theme that's at the heart of Mayfly is forgiveness. And forgiveness starts with acceptance and honesty. I think forgiveness of oneself is one of the most underrated aspects of self-help. I think that far too many people are too hard on themselves, and you have to confront things and address them honestly first before any healing can occur. Music is half of a film, and I collaborated with Sean Bevan and Juliette Bevan from 8mm on the score. We worked mostly online with each other because Sean's studio is up in Lake Arrowhead and I'm down in Los Angeles, and so he would send me clips or pieces that he was working on and ask me what I thought, and I would either write things down and give him notes, or I would use a voice note, or I would record something. I sometimes sang, which is terrible. I sometimes tried to make musical notes and would say like a cello here or a choir of angels here with this kind of thing. And he suffered through it very graciously because he's a musical genius, and he and Juliette work amazingly together. And Juliette is also one of our producers and on set was our first AD as well. And I've worked with her before. And so Sean, I think the original idea that I had was sort of an electronica, kind of a synthwave vibe from the 80s, a little bit of Tangerine Dream, Chernobyl soundtrack. There were some inspirations like that we definitely were drawing from, but we just really collaborated and kind of talked about what our themes were for each character, what the overall arc of the film was energetically, and how important it was for the music to lift up the scenes and lift up those moments and not smother them and not become about the music. It does have a lot of music, but we did not want it to be a music video. And so we really worked at having those moments where it would build, and then it would also tuck kind of back into the background neatly under the acting and have it complement and facilitate and help with the flow of the film more than anything else. That was the most important part of the music, and working with Sean and working with Juliette on that was just a delight because they took everything I was thinking of and made it that much better. The most memorable response that I've received from anybody after watching the film was from a very dear friend of mine who had lost her mother when she was quite young. And she and her father are close. It's not like they're estranged or anything, but they were going to be meeting us for dinner, and they watched the film the night before. And when I first saw them at the restaurant, of course, I was like, hey, what'd you think? And they said, we'll wait until we have the table and sit down and talk about it, which was a little ominous. But we sat down and they were relaying to me how it felt when they watched the film. And she was telling me that when the film was over, she was crying and she turned to her father and said, so what did you think? And his response was, I hated it. She was shocked because she really was profoundly affected by it, and he was crying next to her. But then he explained that he hated it because it hit too close to home for him regarding how he felt with the loss of his wife, her mother. And he asked, how did you know what I was thinking? And of course, I didn't know what he was thinking, but he expressed to us that he had been having almost that exact same dilemma conversation. He felt that his wife had appeared to him after her passing and had a moment with him where she had communicated to him about grief and about his loss. And he had been really at the ragged edge, as our main character is in this film, and was contemplating a lot of the same topics as our character is. And because of the truth of how it hit, it really affected him. So his I I hated it was a huge compliment. Of course, he later clarified that he loved it, but that it had caused him to re-examine a lot of these things that he'd experienced. And he and his daughter ended up staying up until 6 a.m. talking as adults for really, truly the first time in either of their lives about the loss of her mother, his wife, and what they had been through, and really bonded in a deeply meaningful way. That was one of the most powerful and special things that I've ever had anybody tell me about something that I've worked on artistically. And it meant a lot that they felt that way, and it meant a lot that they shared that with me. Film is the most collaborative art form there is. There's some people who think, there's auteurs out there who control everything about it. But the truth is, there are so many artists and artisans and craftsmen and women who work behind the scenes to create a film. You can't get a finished film, especially a well-made finished film, without a lot of people really dedicating themselves to it and working hard. In my case, I was blessed. I had my producing team, which included Katrina Law, Joel Stevens, Juliette Bevan, were fantastic. The pre-production went so smoothly in so many ways in putting everything together. Our editor, David Michael Maurer, he was also our post-production supervisor, associate producer. He was invaluable. He was with me every step of the way through the post-process, in the sound mix. He was in all of the emails with Picture Shop, who handled most of our post-production work. George Delaney was our colorist, and he helped bring to life the vision that Dylan Schneider, our director of photography, had. The two of them worked very closely, making sure that the picture looked exactly the way Dylan and I had discussed. Dylan, the best right-hand man that a director could have all the way through the process, and we collaborated very closely in pre-production to make sure that we were going to have the exact visual look and shot selection that I had in my mind and was planning out. And we had everything dialed in really tightly before we ever rolled at all. And Dylan is just an amazingly talented and super easygoing guy and great to work with. Sarah Kugelmass was our production designer, and she really understood what I was going for as far as the sparse aspect of our lead character's life, and she brought that to life, and also on such a shoestring budget, because we self-financed, we didn't have a lot of money. She was able to help us create a television talk show set, a TED Talk live set, a bookstore. We did get a standing hospital, but they come very spare, as anyone can tell you. When you rent these standing sets, you've got to dress them and make them look practical and real. And she and her team, they just did such a good job. Sarah Barnett was also one of our set decorators. Of course, Sean Bevan and Juliette Bevan did our original score. I had James Troost. He's the Steadicam and First Cam for NCIS, the television show, and I was super lucky because he was our camera operator, and I got to have him running through that tall grass, rocky terrain, the side of a mountain for those great outdoor shots. As far as sound goes, my production mixer was Jeffrey Haddad, who had just come off of Top Gun Maverick. I also had Gail Carroll Coe, who was our boom operator, who she's worked with a guy named Clint Eastwood. You might have heard of him, and she has been his boom operator in a lot of his movies. And for me to get that kind of talent to come in and work on set with the sound made it so great that when we took it into our post for sound, Christian Gekosala, who's a fellow Loyola Marymount graduate, was doing our sound mix, and he was complimenting how great the production sound was, and was saying how he's not used to getting an independent, especially a self-financed short film that had this quality of sound in it originally, and that's entirely because of them. It's not like the director holds the boom or mixes anything. I had brilliant artists around me every step of the way, and they really made everything possible. The list goes on, and I could start naming everybody, but just as a whole, it was a really talented, really dedicated, hardworking team, and I can't wait to get our next project up because I want to bring every single one of them back if they'll have me. This last question is the hardest one. I think any filmmaker being asked to make a list of films that have influenced them or favorite films is in for a rough one. My top 5 favorite films are Blade Runner, Singing in the Rain, Heat, The Maltese Falcon, and Fight Club. Those are my top 5 favorite films. If you go to 10, then you'd have to include Raiders of the Lost Ark, Back to the Future, LA Confidential, Tombstone, and The Searchers. That's my top 10. All of those influenced me wanting to tell stories, but I think I have to kind of expand a little outside of that and talk about visual inspirations. Blade Runner again, but City of Lost Children, Amelie, Grand Budapest Hotel, Pan's Labyrinth, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, and Big Fish are all films visually that inspired me and I've looked at and tried to emulate and tried to learn from. And then story-wise, when I'm writing or building a film in post, it's got to be Pulp Fiction, Memento, Vertigo, The Usual Suspects, and The Big Lebowski. So you asked me for 5, and I gave you 20? Thanks for tuning in for my answers to Tinsel and Tine's 5 questions for indie filmmakers. And thank you to Tinsel and Tine for taking the time to ask me the questions and feature us.